Well, well, well. Jesus barrels up to a tiny town in the middle of nowhere, in a place he shouldn't be, and he starts talking to people who shouldn't talk back. My, my, my. There are so many interesting things about this sermon, about this parable, this encounter. It is the longest conversation that Jesus records with a woman almost anywhere in the scriptures. And like most of the good and wise theological women there, she gives him what for? Give me a drink. She says, I don't know you. And what are you doing talking to me? You're a Jew. Jews and Samaritans had this sort of long-running theological dispute. It was deep, shall we say. It was wide, and they did not agree on nearly anything. And so divisive was this that, in fact, they, like Republicans and Democrats of our current day, well, just found it easier to sit on opposite sides of cities, tables, countries even. He says, I could have given you something really good. She's like, I don't see a bucket. You got something good for me? Are you bigger than the guy who dug this well? I don't think so. Well, Jesus says, somebody to spar with, all right. He says, no, it's a different kind of water. It's the kind of water that never runs out. It never runs dry. You drink from this water, you never stop. You never have to drink again. She's like, bring it on, because I'm tired of carrying this well water back home. Now, what do you have to know about this woman? Interesting things. You do not go to the well at midday when Jesus works this conversation. It is not at midday that you go to the well. When do you need water? In the morning. That's when you do your bathing. That's when you got to start the cooking for the day. All the women of the village would have traditionally, normally, joyfully gone together for a little water, a little gossip, a little news. They would have gone to the well in the morning. How come she doesn't? What's she doing at noon? Did she just have an extra need? Was she going by herself maybe because nobody else wanted to go with her? Maybe scholars have suggested she was not welcome at that well. And she was not going to be a part of that little coffee klatch that gathered there. She was, rumored to not be married to her husband. She had a couple of them. You lose one husband, that's unfortunate. You lose two husbands, well, that's just sad. But 3 husbands and more, that's just irresponsible. My, people said. And, well. Look who it is. Look who's coming to the well. She may have been coming at midday just intentionally in that heat, knowing that the people who were cool were staying home, and that she could come gather the water in peace without the harsh stares and the dry, mean spirits that surrounded her. Jesus calls her out on this, though, sees deeper than that pain and reaches in, and with her has the theological conversation that the disciples seem incapable of. Did you notice that? With her, he talks about this living water of life. With her, he engages in what it is to be faithful, to be good, to be honest, to be pure, to be true, to be religious. The disciples come back, having gone out, and sees her talking. They're shocked. Jesus is talking with a girl. Is he supposed to be talking with a girl? I don't think girls aren't supposed to be talking to him. Shh, be quiet. What's she saying? I can't hear. Shut up. And then they say, you better get something to eat. He says, I've got food that is more important than anything you brought me in that brown bag of yours. And they're like, did somebody else feed him? They're not particularly bright, these men disciples. They're not really on top of what's going on here and what is going on. In this passage, regardless of her circumstance, Jesus has stepped up and out of the conventions of his day. He has sat down with a foreigner, with a theological reprobate, with a member of the opposite party, with a woman. He has engaged in conversation about the Almighty God with someone who was not a rabbi, not in a synagogue, not a man. And what he has offered is a glimpse of redemption to someone who was feeling like an outcast. By this point in the story, have the disciples gone to tell anybody about the good news they have heard? They have not. At this point in the story, have they understood that he might be Messiah? They have not. In fact, the teacher of Israel, Nicodemus, who we heard about last week in chapter 3, the teacher of Israel, the smart one, the rabbi, when does he show up to talk to Jesus? At noon, in the light, by a well? Shows up at midnight, skulking around in the shadows, afraid to talk about in the day what he wants desperately to know about in the dark. This woman, benighted by allegations, rumor, and innuendo, this woman, perhaps of a darker character, perhaps they said about her, she shows up, she mouths off to Jesus, and he suggests to her that the day is surely coming when all of these divisions will mean nothing because spirit and truth will win. Well, well, well. What does that do for us? Out of this ought to come some hope for you. Out of this ought to come some hope for all of us. Out of this is a reminder that the people we think are the most important are often sitting at the wells talking inappropriately with the people who know what's actually true. Out of this ought to come to us a reminder that it is when we step up and over our bounds and limitations that we find the living water that feeds our very soul. A lot of us live in a well-watered garden of privilege. A lot of us live in a well-watered garden of hardly any need. We have internet and phones. We have the ability to lose ourselves for hours at a time in distractions of our own manufacture. We have the luxury of letting other people grow our own food and haul our own water. It is a stark reminder that that the vast majority of people carry their water an average of 2.5 miles a day. And I walk an average of 2.5 steps to a tap to turn it on. And has all that privilege made us happier? Has all that privilege made us wiser? Have we suddenly got a better access to spirit or truth? One of John's points in this story, I think, is to remind us that it is the woman for whom it is work and for whom life is maybe some suffering, who understands what it is when the drops of living water suddenly make the ground of her being come alive. Maybe we who are flooded with all that other useless water can't notice when somebody is trying to float our boat with something bigger. But she does. She gets it. Unlike Nicodemus, who can't understand how it is that he's going to follow Jesus even though he's supposed to uphold the law. It's not like the disciples who are running around trying to keep Jesus fed with physical food and paying no attention whatsoever to the food he's trying to give them that will build up not just their bodies but their entire mind and heart and soul. She gets it. She's hungry, she's thirsty, she knows what water tastes like, and she knows that this is water she didn't have to carry. The living water, it doesn't come from a well and go into a bucket and have to be hauled in. Living water flows to you. So here we are, trapped near our taps, and outside is the stream. Jesus must have just shaken his head at all of the disciples then and all of us now who fail to see what it is we're supposed to draw deep from. It isn't the well of our tribe. It isn't the well of our patriarchy, our patrimony, our inheritance, our power, or our privilege. That's not the well from which we're supposed to draw up the waters of life. Not for ourselves, and God knows it's never worked out well for others. When we have watered the land with those well waters, we have spread colonialism and slavery. We have brought wage inequity and incredible violence to this world whenever we decide to operate out of our sense of entitlement and righteous privilege. But Jesus sits with the suspect woman in a suspect town, and he has deep conversation about how God's love transcends all of that. God's love knows all the problems and can see deep right into the waters of our own misgivings, bad decisions maybe, best hopes but failed dreams. God sees into those things, and all of God's hope and spirit and truth transcends and calls her to come up and out. And so what does she do? She does the very thing that Nicodemus could not. She runs right back to the people who hated her, the people who despised her, the people who went every time she walked by. And she said, "You will not believe. You have to come. You have to come right now. You have to come right now. Do you think he might be the Messiah? There's a guy who you got to go. You got to come with me right now." She does what none of the other disciples to this point have ever tried, and that is she believes. She takes that living water and she spreads it around. And they come out, and at the end of the story they say, we don't disbelieve because you told us. We believe because what you saw, we see. It's the outsiders who believe first. It's the ones who are desperate who most often know when a good thing has come into their hands. It is those who are broken who know what healing means and how much it matters. This week, this year, this whole life, you are going to get a chance, probably as a powerful person, probably as a privileged person, probably as a mostly well person, to either stick to your tribe and drink only from the wells you dug yourself out of your own sense of capabilities. But this day, this week, this life, your faith is going to demand of you that you draw living water for somebody else. That you step up and out of your own health or your own wealth, and you bring that healing and you bring that privilege to those who are thirsty to know what it's like. This week, when they make that decision about health care, this week, when they talk about how they're going to save taxes for those rich enough to pay taxes, I'm going to be thinking about the waters at that well. This year, when we start talking belligerence and we start wondering whether we're going to be able to keep America the greatest military power on the planet with only another $54 billion of expenditure in what is already the largest expenditure on weapons, death dealing, and arms this country, this world, this history of humanity has ever known, I'm going to be thinking about that well. I'm going to be thinking about the people that people look at and go, should have got a job. Should have voted for Trump. Should have gone into the army. Should have stayed off drugs. Shouldn't have gotten pregnant. Shouldn't have taken that job. Shouldn't have gone to that university. Shouldn't have driven that car. Shouldn't have been in that neighborhood. Shouldn't have been wearing those clothes. All the things that we think about and go, well, well, well. Because I think at some point, we too are going to be sitting at heaven's gate, and it's not going to be pearly. There's going to be a stream, and there's going to be a watering hole. And Jesus is going to look deep into your eyes and mine too, and going to say, well, well, well. What have you done for others this week? If you'd just asked, there'd been living water, and nobody would have had to been thirsty. Amen.